But there's kind of an idea that I think we talked about this in part 2 that like he wanted to impregnate as many women as possible to
right.
continue on his lineage, and it's an extremely narcissistic thing.
Oh, absolutely. Of course not. But it's really interesting. So now we've referenced eugenics a couple times throughout this podcast, right? So Epstein he actually had access to the what was it called? The Evolutionary Dynamics Department in the Marine Biology Wing at Harvard for 10 years after his first indictment, which is insane. Once again, very interesting. Bill Gates was also involved in Harvard and wanted to have like really a hand in controlling some of the different research, that they were doing. It is on record actually that Alan Dershowitz was very disturbed by Epstein's curiosity in eugenics, and he thought it was like basically on the same par as the Nazis, which is very funny because Dershowitz is Jewish and Epstein is Jewish. So Dershowitz is like, from one Jew to another, this is kind of like established Nazism or neo-Nazism or something, you know?
Yeah, well, to bring up more stuff from the new file release a couple days ago, there's some conversations in there about, the IQ scores of specific races. So he's definitely like a white supremacist in some ways.
You think Epstein was?
Yeah.
Do you think Epstein was racist? Because
there was also another specific thing that it was, I don't know if all, but it was mostly white women on the island. He didn't really traffic.
Yeah, I got something on that. It's really interesting you bring that up. Yeah.
Okay, we'll hold that off for later.
No, that's okay.
I do think that's good evidence that like he definitely had a preference, and I think a lot of the.
Well, you know the braces thing, right?
Yeah.
I've seen like braces, like.
But there's kind of an idea that I think we talked about this in part 2 that like he wanted to impregnate as many women as possible to continue on his lineage, and it's an extremely narcissistic thing, I guess. Like, I'm so superior to everyone else that if there are more people with my genetics out there.
Right, and we learn about how Ghislaine even talks about all these women that they traffic, and like they are literally trash. Like, so they maybe racist is like a little bit of a jump, but at least what's the word, classist or
Yeah, he looked down upon the kind of poor women that he would have preyed on.
Right. And so now,
which is probably how he justified it to himself, what he was doing.
Oh, like, of course.
Oh, these aren't people in the same way that I'm a person and Ghislaine's a person. They're lesser.
Do you think Epstein had any guilt or any do you think he even needed to justify anything? Because once again, I just want to know what made him soulless. Is it just one of the super rare cases where he was just so his brain chemistry was just nuts and he became a psychopath and all this stuff, or what helped and encouraged his sexual deviancy? I guess it's just power.
I can't imagine he had any empathy, and if he did, it wasn't strong enough to counteract.
Of course, desire. I'm not making a case for Epstein, obviously. So you mentioned a part of the eugenic stuff. So I actually have found a little bit more context to what that actually is. So I'm going to be reading off the page for another second, guys. So please don't mind me. I just kind of had to do some digging to find this. But basically, when we talk about Epstein and research with Harvard, so he funded research that led to this thing called CRISPR, and it was directly funded once again by Epstein himself. And so this word CRISPR stands for clustered, regularly interspaced, short palindromic repeats. And I will explain why. So basically, it is genetic engineering that is powerful, precise technology that allows scientists to edit DNA in living cells, functioning like molecular scissors, to cut DNA at specific locations, enabling gene insertion, gene deletion, or modification to correct genetic defects, study gene function, and develop therapies for diseases like sickle cell. It's faster, cheaper, and more efficient than older methods, revolutionizing research in medicine, like cancer, HIV. agriculture and environmental science. So, and this is literally the research when you talk about the perfect fetus.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. I in college in 2016, I wrote an essay on CRISPR.
You did?
Yeah, I did.
Whoa!
I should send that to you, honestly, if I can
That's
find
sick.
it. But like,
Please do.
it was the first time at the time that I had ever heard of it before, and I feel like I've heard it come up like quite a few times
Right.
in the future. But the idea was like, what is the ethics of this? Because yes, it can be used to solve genetic defects. Like you could cure Down syndrome, you could cure a lot of other diseases like that. But also, if it's a procedure that costs money, could the richest people in society make their kids smarter, more attractive,
Of course.
more athletic, better in every single way? And then, like, I don't know, the delusions of being better than the lower classes are suddenly backed up by like, well, you just have better genetics. And then I don't know what happens to the lower classes then when you're treating them with even less regard, because they probably still have these genetic defects, and it's just a really, really, I don't know. I think in our current society, it's not a good idea. It's not a good thing to be introduced.
I don't think it is either, you know? And it's so funny, man, because it's even even through like we found out through later reporting too. I forget who exactly reported this. Maybe I can cite myself later, but by like an anonymous source of Ghislaine, like every 3 months, Ghislaine would bring in, like, obviously we now know about like Leslie Groff, Sarah Kellen, like these like people underneath Ghislaine that were like arguably just as bad, and they're being even more exposed. And like I think at least Leslie Groff is mentioned in one of the new files. I think it was like Nadia Marcinikova was one of the other ones. But every 3 months, Ghislaine would bring in like these good-looking, like tall, blonde, like intelligent, very intelligent, like athletic, like Swedish men specifically. So stuff is starting to make sense.